thesis, and I believe this to be 100% true. Female maturation involves a gain of non-propulsive mass. Females, when their body changes at puberty, their hips get wider and they develop breasts. That does not athletically help you at all. Whereas a young male is going through the exact opposite problem in terms of a young male is getting more muscular. He's gaining size, he's gaining strength, he's getting lots of positives through the puberty process. The female is literally trying to survive this body change that is not at all conducive in general to making them a better athlete. And then you think about that and you take a young female who maybe in the course of a 1 year time period goes through a really significant body change. That significant body change really changes what you're doing from a decelerative standpoint, really changes what you're doing. And so you're getting heavier. You can't control that, generally speaking. And you're not getting stronger. So you start looking at, like, I look at it and think, my God, strength training for females through puberty is absolutely positively essential because they're already at a disadvantage based on what's going to occur with their body. But even I always use the term non-propulsive mass because I was trying to find, okay, what's a nice way to say this that's not going to get people all up in arms? But they are gaining non-propulsive mass. The male is gaining propulsive mass. And when you look, that's really where the lines diverge, right? When you think about that U12 time, you don't see a lot of ACL tears in young prepubescent females. You see that number go through the roof immediately post puberty because you get somebody who they got kind of a bigger chassis and they didn't get any upgrade in the brakes. And you think, okay, that's going to be a problem because this person probably maybe wasn't a great decelerator to begin with, but now we've really changed kind of the composition of the system and the brakes are still the same. And that to me is literally, not to try to make it a play on words, but that's where it breaks down, where suddenly you think, okay, I've got this young girl who is now heavier, her body shape has changed, and I haven't upgraded the braking system. And ACL tears are a failure of the braking system. No one tears an ACL in acceleration, right? I mean, we know how it happens. It's a plant. It's a decelerative step. It's a direction change step that causes that injury to happen. And that to me is, on the simplest level, a strength failure, but on a more complex level, an eccentric strength failure, or if we want to look at that, a stability decelerative failure. But in any case, the system gets overwhelmed.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up the growth spurt because that's the most optimal time to get a female athlete into a gym setting. But still I see parents hesitant. They're like, "Oh, is it too young to get into a gym setting or should we wait a little bit longer?" And I'm just like, "Well, if you think she's going through growing pains, you can turn those into gains if you get into the gym during this time." So is it good to start in middle school to get into that gym setting, like 11, 12, 13?
I'm a big fan. I think 11, that's where we start kids. I would like to see kids starting at 11. And particularly, as I said, when you're dealing with what we would have to look at it as an at-risk population, right? We've got an at-risk population of young females, particularly if they're playing lacrosse, they're playing soccer, or they're playing basketball. Those are kind of the big three from an ACL tear standpoint. I'd be getting that kid involved in a strength training program as soon as I could at 11 years old and say, okay, because the other thing we talk about all the time is that year one is always year one. So whether year one is at 18 or at 11, I'm going to end up teaching you the exact same things at 18 that I would be teaching you at 11. I'm going to start, like, as you said, I'm going to maybe teach you how to do a split squat. I'm going to try to teach you how to do a one leg squat. There are these things I'm going to try to teach you how to do, say, a hurdle, hop, and stick. What I think I have a huge advantage teaching that at 11 versus teaching that at 18. So why not get started? Because the good thing with the female athlete is you don't get people worried about stunted growth, which is a good thing. Whereas with the males, we still have people coming to us and saying, "Well, I don't want him to lift weights because it's going to stunt his growth." Which again, total. I mean, there's no scientific basis for that ever, and people have really tried to dig in and figure out where did that come from. I don't know Well, I do know where it came from, but it came from a study on Japanese child labor. They said Japanese children that were forced to do child labor were smaller than their age-adjusted counterparts. And somehow that,
I've never heard of that.
right, it's actually the New York Times article where they talk about it. But that was somehow extrapolated to strength training. That somehow, and the reality is, if you are having to do labor in Japan as a child, you've probably got a poverty problem, which means you've probably got a nutrition problem. There's probably a whole bunch of layers there. Even if you wanted to believe that particular topic, you would have to look and say, hey, there's a lot of confounding factors here that don't come into play. But you don't get that as much. I don't think I've ever had a female parent come to me and say, I'm worried that this is going to stunt her growth. But we do get that a lot with the young males. What I've tried to do, I think the bigger thing with females is, oh, I don't want my kid to end up looking like a bodybuilder. And people will show you pictures of some CrossFit competitor or something like that. And go, I don't want her to end up like that. And I look and think, there's absolutely no chance that she ends up looking like that. So
Right.
one of the things that we've started to do, I've started to get some videos of our some of our better female athletes talking about their weight and about. So I don't have we don't have a ton of soccer. We have a lot more lacrosse women and hockey women, but we have two of the best attackers in the world that train with us, both on the national team, and they've been with us. I think post college, one of them maybe 4 years and one of them 5 years post college. They're still playing at a really high level on the national team. Neither one of them has gained any weight at all. And one of them is Charlotte North, who's sort of she's the it girl of women's lacrosse now. If you follow women's lacrosse, everybody knows who Charlotte North is. But I asked her, and she's funny because she's got a great personality. She's giggling during the video, and she's like, "I haven't gained any. I haven't gained a pound in 4 years." And you look at it and think this kid's been strength training aggressively for 4 years and isn't a pound heavier. I think so. I guess my point is that the muscle size thing is really unfounded, but that's one of the big concerns I think for the parent of the young female athlete that suddenly somehow you or I are going to turn their kid into this freakish bodybuilder that is suddenly incredibly unattractive because they've lifted weights, and that's still something that we fight against.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy that that's still a thing. I think it has gotten a little bit better. And I think it's great that you have your older girls and your high level girls like really speaking to this, like how it's helped their performance and their bodies pretty much the same, just really athletic and powerful. So I think that's a great example. Now with like the younger middle school girls, like they come in on week one, what are some of the foundational things you're teaching them? Because I think a lot of parents, they're like, okay, yes, we want them to strength train, but we see a bunch of different training videos online and what is correct or appropriate for this age group.
So for us, we really teach the basics, particularly with that 11-year-old. We're going to teach them how to squat. And again, I'm not a huge bilateral squat person, but I still want a kid that can do a goblet squat, right? We're going to teach them to deadlift. I want them to be able to do a kettlebell deadlift. I want them to be able to do a split squat. I want them to be able to do a one leg straight leg deadlift. We're going to start with the fundamental building blocks of a good quality strength program. But we're also going to teach them how to warm up. We're going to teach them how to jump and land. We're going to teach them how to hop and land. We're going to teach them how to bound and land. And I don't know if you've been watching the latest Strength Coach podcast Ken Vick was on, and he talked about shocks versus springs, which I think is a really interesting. So our progression, as I've started to analyze it in my head, is shocks before springs.
Mhm.
So we're going to develop shocks. We're going to develop that ability to land and to decelerate. And then eventually we're going to worry about the springs. I think the springs are ultimately more important, but if I try to develop them, if I go right to what I would call real plyos, reactive kind of jumps and hops and bounds, I'm probably going to get some kids hurt. If I start with this, uh, like what we would call a stick phase, which is really, I think, that shock development phase. And we've started to get away from the idea of shock absorber because what we've realized as we study physics more is that you're really not absorbing force, you're simply managing it. So what we're trying to do with everybody, not just the young girls, with every athlete that we're dealing with, is get them to develop that ability to manage these forces. Because again, if we think about what is the ACL tear, the ACL tear is basically someone who can't manage the speed that they've created. They get moving too fast. There's too much momentum going forward. They can't effectively brake, and when you can't brake, well, then you get the femur moving on the fixed tibia, and that's what basically clips that ACL off. And you've got to get people that have that braking mechanism. You need the strength to have the braking mechanism, but you also need the eccentric strength, that ability to stick the landing so that you know that we've turned that strength that we've developed through split squat or one leg squat or whatever it is into a usable strength that's going to help us to decelerate.
Now, I want to ask about in-season training because a lot of parents listening are like, well, like, yeah, we have a 12-year-old girl, but we practice 3 or 4 days a week with our club team, and then we have 1 to 2 games on the weekend. How do we fit this in? Is it too much? What do you say to those parents?
I've taken to saying now 2 times 52, 2 times a week, 52 weeks a year for the rest of their life. And I just did a talk for a bunch of young female hockey players, and that was exactly what I told them. I said, you should be strength training 2 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year until you decide that you're not playing hockey at a serious level anymore. I would say the same thing to the parents of a young soccer player. 2 times a week, 52 weeks a year until you decide that this is no longer important. Because the way this